Hey guys, it's Cans, and today I wanted to take you with me to show you how I made this mixed media canvas of mine. I've done a lot of mixed media work before in my own sketchbooks, but never have I really tried my hand at a full canvas. So in this shot, you can see me priming it. I primed vertically, then horizontally a few times, I think, just to make that canvas really smooth. So that when it was time for me to apply my first layers of paint on the background, the canvas was basically just perfect with no texture, no nothing. So the theme that I wanted to go for with this one was very watery. So I chose, I think, 3 different shades of blue and one shade of like maybe a yellowy green. And I painted these really kind of swirly, wavy patterns on the background just to get me started. With mixed media, usually it's not something that I think up like very intensely beforehand. I just kind of go with the flow, and I choose my color palettes and my theme. So for this, I really just went through with a bunch of blues and I blended them in and I went over them a few times. And to be fair, this background was difficult for me to do for whatever reason. I just wasn't liking much about how it was turning out. So I did rework it a good few times before I was finally happy with it. I really, really was glad that I put these swirly bits in. I think that they just created some interest because I was not like it just wasn't working for me. So these swirly kind of curls and stuff, I think that really started me on the right track, but I did soon get very sick of that as well. So I started adding more bits of this and that, and I started smudging it up a little bit because I just wasn't, I don't know, for whatever reason, this background just wasn't working for me at the start. So this is when I put in some of that nice chartreusey kind of green, and I'm glad that I did because it added some warmth that I usually like to have in my own paintings, but I still wasn't really gelling with this background at all. So you'll see I spent quite a bit of time working on it. Here you can see me scrunching up some paper to rip up and stick to the background using some Mod Podge to create some texture, and I like that crinkly effect of stuff. So I think that when it comes to mixed media, you can't be perfect about things. You have to kind of just go with whatever strikes you in the moment kind of thing. So ripping up this crunched up paper and sticking it on, it felt weird at first, but looking back, I'm really glad that I did because at least it helped me break the background so I could start thinking about what I actually wanted to do with it. So it really worked just to make it less perfect so didn't feel so specific and so nitpicky about what was going on the canvas. So you'll see that it's just had a really big change. I went much more vertical with things, and now here I am using the end of my paint tube to dot big blobs of white. And a favorite technique of mine with mixed media is to add big chunks of acrylic texture paste, which dries in a very raised texture. So anything you paint over it will tend to have a really fun texture to it. And this is the end of day 1. On day 2, I started out sketching out, you probably can't see it very well, a very thin pencil etch of just the outline of a woman. Something that I'm very familiar with, and after I painted it in white, I sketched in a little face for her, and I started to fill it in with grey. I've done some mixed media canvas work before, like a very little, and in that one I also used grey and white for the portraiture, and I think that it really helps to make the rest of the colours kind of stand out a bit more. And what I really enjoyed about doing this portrait in just greys and whites was that I had to really think about the shades that I was using and where the light was hitting the sketch that I thought up and all of that sort of thing. So I spent a good while. Most of the second day was spent painting this face because I just kept reworking things, and for whatever reason I was struggling with her nose a lot. So you'll see I go back and forth over and over again over this face. Usually I'm quite comfortable with portraits, but I think when it's paint, and acrylic paint portrait is not something that I'm like very familiar with. I have done it before in the past, but it's not something I do regularly. So I really took my time trying to turn this into something that I was really happy with. So you'll see I reworked this a ton. So you can see here that I basically finished the rest of the face off camera because I needed to put the canvas on the floor so I could get better control of my brushes. And now I'm just going in with that same grey that I was using and painting in these big swirly like chunks of hair. I was kind of confused on how to do hair underwater, so I just kind of made it look a bit more weightless. You can see my cat in the background there. So I just kind of make it a bit weightless, a bit flowy. I'm not so sure how I liked it, but in the end, I mean, it worked, so that's what counts, I guess. And something that I really enjoy doing with hair when I'm painting with acrylics is doing the big chunks first and then going back in with a tiny little detailed liner brush and painting in like little wisps of hair instead. And here you can see me using that very same liner brush to put in just bits of white. It's not necessarily very realistic, but I just wanted to show movement of the hair and some highlighted bits and that kind of thing. And I don't know, I enjoyed it myself. Now comes my favorite part of any mixed media project, and that is planning and adding in all the extra bits. So for this one, I went ahead and drew out and painted 3 bright orange goldfish. I don't really know why I went with goldfish. I think I just enjoyed the orange. And this is the end actually of day 2. So to start off day 3, I wanted to finish off my little goldfish, and I got this little like tool, I think it is, little sack drawstring bag, and I cut it up, and what I used it for was I traced around it and I cut the specific shape of some of the fins and tails of the goldfish out, and I stitched it to the goldfish tails with this like maroon embroidery thread. I really wanted to create some kind of dimension because goldfish tend to be very wispy creatures, I think, and they've got a lot of movement in their tails and stuff. So I just wanted to experiment with putting some of this netting stuff on my actual goldfish, and I'm really glad with how it turned out. In fact, I think it's my favorite part of the whole piece, and I just had a lot of fun with it, and I think that it adds just that extra level of dimension that you really expect from a mixed media project. So I completed that for all 3 fish. I did it mostly on their tails. After the fish were done, I started with the wool. So I have a big crocheted bag of wool. I've got a lot of interesting hobbies. And I started out by measuring a few lengths of this white wool. I went with, I think, about 8 per side in the end. And basically, what I was planning to do with this was to create some kind of almost fishnet effect. I wanted to create some kind of shirt for her because I wasn't really interested in painting much of her chest, if that makes sense. So here I've cut them up into the individual lengths and I'm just tying them together. And I did 2 of these bundles and I stuck one to the top of each shoulder. And I didn't know what I was getting into when I started with this net idea because, as you can imagine, weaving a bunch of like thin, wispy wool into a kind of net shape while glue is still trying to dry is very difficult. So I also got some of these little bits and bobs that I had in my collection because I really wanted to see if I could decorate this net to help it be a bit more, I don't know, stand out or something like that. So here you can see me sticking down the one side completely, and this just created a nice base for me to weave the other ends of wool through. But as you can watch me do it here, it was quite difficult because I didn't want to mess up any of the like glued down pieces. I didn't want to weave it wrong, so it was a bit of an investment of time, and this did take up a lot of my 3rd day of work. So yeah, I enjoyed it, but at what cost, you know? So to hide the end of these bundles, I got a bunch of craft shells, clam shells, I suppose, and I used some of this wood glue to stick them down, as well as this length of chain that I had. I don't really know what the chain was meant to symbolize. I just wanted to create something interesting. So I glued the chain down and then I covered those ends with the shells. And this took a lot of drying time because, as you can imagine, I had to basically just fill those shells with glue to make sure that they would stay. I didn't want them falling off of my wall or something like that. So a lot of day 3 was just letting glue dry, which was just great, as you can imagine. But I had a lot of coffee and I had some YouTube playing in the background, so I was able to just, you know, go with the flow and wait with the process. So now that that part is done, I ended up sticking some more stuff, which is just great. I had these little star-shaped, I want to call them brads, but they're not really brads because they don't go all the way through the canvas. But I had these little metal stars, and so I just put them there to add something to the netted clothing, I want to say, and as earrings. And even though I didn't really paint any ears for her, I just liked it. I suppose if it's hanging on my wall, maybe if the light catches them at different angles, it might, I don't know, do something. So I just kind of went with it and I stuck them on. They were really, really cute, so I was glad that I did that. Here I'm taking a bunch of paper clips, and I had the great idea to try and fashion my own fish hooks out of them, which was kind of difficult, but I did about three of them, I think. Um, I don't have any actual fish hooks on me, so I wanted to make these, and I put them in the net. I don't know if I was trying to say anything with this at all. I think I just really wanted to add more bits because I was kind of at a bit of a loss with what to do with the bottom of this. So yeah, homemade fish hooks it is, and I think they turned out pretty decently. I just had little pieces of paperclip chilling all over my carpet for the rest of this day's work. And here you can see I just put really thick double-sided tape on the undersides of all three of my fish, and I stuck them in kind of a triangular position all over the canvas itself. I don't know, it just created some interest. I don't know, I enjoyed it and I was glad that I made the fish in the first place. And here I felt like her face was just boring. So I took a piece of not silvering, silver looking wire and a big blue bead that I had in my collection of stuff. And I just created some kind of, I don't know, a headpiece in artwork that I've created before. I've made those. So this is the finished product, and this is what it looked like at the end of day 3. So thank you for joining me, and I hope that you had fun watching me attempt a mixed media canvas.